The year was 1883. Clara Delain had lived 32 years, building a life most women in Silver Creek, Colorado, envied. Her hands could turn raw muslin into wedding gowns that made brides weep, and her small shop on Aspen Street smelled perpetually of lilac sachets and fresh-pressed linen. She was engaged to Victor Penhall, the bank owner's eldest son, a man of starched collars and predictable ambition. Then came September 14th. The freight wagon carrying her new shipment of fabrics hit a hidden washout on the treacherous eastern road. Clara, riding along to inspect the silk, remembered the sky tilting, the heavy bolts of cloth sliding forward like an avalanche. Then nothing but darkness and a pain that lived in her spine like a fire that refused to die. Doc Thorne, who'd seen more broken bodies than a battlefield medic, stood at the foot of her bed 3 weeks later. His face carried the quiet gravity of inescapable truth. "Your spine ain't severed, Miss Delain," he said, turning his hat in his weathered hands. "But the damage is considerable. Lower back. I've seen this before. Falls, mining accidents, the legs won't answer anymore." Clara lay still beneath the quilts. "You mean I won't walk again?" Doc Thorne shifted his weight. "The likelihood is slim, real slim. You'll need a chair with wheels and someone to help with daily tasks. It's a hard road, miss. A hard road indeed." She nodded once and turned her face to the wall. The world had split, and she was on the wrong side of the fissure. Victor came the following Tuesday. He sat stiffly beside her bed, his clean hands resting on his knees. He looked everywhere, except at her eyes. "Clara, I've been thinking," he began, the sentence already poisoned by its careful, rehearsed delivery. "This changes things considerably. My position at the bank, the expectations of my family, the kind of life we'd planned. It requires a certain capability. You're calling off the engagement." Victor cleared his throat, relief flooding his features before he could mask it. "I'm being practical. You'll need care, constant attention. I'm not suited for that kind of responsibility. Surely you can see. Get out." He stood quickly. "I'll make sure the ring is returned through proper channels. I wish you well, Clara. I truly do." The door clicked shut. Clara didn't cry. She lay there, watching a fly struggle in a web on the ceiling. Within a month, she'd moved from the boarding house to a small, isolated log cabin 3 miles outside town. It sat in a clearing by a creek bed, far enough from Silver Creek that she wouldn't have to see pity in every passing face. Her savings bought the property, and enough supplies for a winter she had no guarantee of surviving. The cabin was 2 rooms. The oak and iron wheelchair arrived in October, squeaking defiance. Movement was everything. Clara learned to navigate her domain, her arms growing strong. Her sewing business evaporated. Women found someone more convenient. Clara knew the truth. She represented a fragility they didn't want to acknowledge. By December, her savings were gone. She sold her good fabric and her silver thimble. She rationed cornmeal and firewood, burning only enough to prevent frost inside. The worst wasn't the cold or the hunger. The worst was the silence. Just the wind in the cottonwoods, the creek settling, and the steady breathing of Cyrus, her father's old, arthritic hound, who slept across the threshold. January brought the worst cold anyone could remember. The creek froze solid, and snow piled 4 feet high. Clara's last 3 logs went into the stove on the 9th day. She knew she was facing death. She sat at her table, writing a careful list of what to sell next. The table, her grandmother's quilt. That evening, Cyrus lifted his head, ears pricked. Clara heard it too, the crunch of a wagon through frozen snow. Her heart hammered against her ribs. No one came out here. She wheeled herself to the door and opened it. Cold air rushed in. A large man, broad-shouldered, dressed in buckskin and wool, stood at her meager woodpile, assessing it with his hands on his hips. "I didn't send for help," she called out, her voice sharp with wounded pride. The man turned. He was weathered, probably in his 40s, with a dark beard and eyes that sat deep beneath heavy brows. He didn't smile. He just looked at her, a long, steady look that was not pity or curiosity, but something else entirely, assessment and competence. "Didn't figure you did," he said. His voice was deep, roughened by years of weather and silence. "Name's Thane McRae. I trap up in the San Juan range. Heard in town there was a woman out here alone, low on supplies." I'm managing fine. Thane's gaze moved past her to the cold darkness of the cabin's interior, the empty wood box, the thin blanket on her chair. Respectfully, ma'am, you ain't. Clara's hands gripped the wheels of her chair. I don't accept charity. Ain't offering charity, he replied, walking back to his wagon. He began unloading split logs, stacking them beside the porch with efficient, practiced movements. I need goods from town. Flour, salt, ammunition. Easier if I know someone out this way. You got a roof, I got firewood. Fair trade for a place to stop when I come through. It was a lie, a transparent one, but it was a lie that allowed her to accept what she needed without surrendering the last shred of her dignity. One night, she said, you can sleep in the barn. I'm not running a boarding house. Understood, ma'am. He worked until full dark, unloading enough wood to last until spring. When he finished, he tipped his head toward her, not quite a bow, not quite a nod, and climbed back onto his wagon. I'll be back through in a month, he said. Check that ramp of yours. It's listing hard to the left. He drove off into the night. Clara wheeled herself inside. The stacked firewood looked like a fortress wall. She added 2 whole logs to the stove, a luxury she hadn't allowed herself in weeks, and watched the flames roar. For the first time since September, she allowed herself to imagine surviving until spring. Cinematic interlude. A slow, tracking shot of the cabin, lights glowing warmly against the massive, terrifying winter landscape. The sound of the wind is replaced by the comforting, rhythmic crackle of the full stove. What price do you put on survival? What do you sacrifice when you accept help? Part 2. The Rebuilding Thane. McRae returned on February 7th, the sun blindingly bright on the snow. Clara was attempting to patch gloves when she heard the wagon. Cyrus's tail thumped a welcome. She didn't go to the door immediately, finishing her stitch first. When she wheeled to the window, Thane was unloading a sack of flour and what looked like salt pork. I told you I don't take charity, she said, opening the door. And I told you it ain't charity. These are supplies I can't carry into the high country. I need to cache them somewhere I can trust. Your cabin's ideal. He had her there. She wheeled back, allowing him entrance. He stored the food, then stood surveying the room. His attention settled on the ramp outside. That ramp's about to collapse, he said. Another good snow, and the boards will give way entirely. It's held this long. That doesn't mean safe. He was already heading back outside. Clara wheeled after him, frustrated by his presumption, yet unable to deny the truth. The ramp was treacherous. Thane knelt beside it. I can fix this. Take a few hours. Got tools in the wagon. Mr. McRae, Thane. I appreciate your concern, but I can't pay for repairs. He glanced up at her, a hint of amusement in his weathered face. You figure I'm charging you? Not everything requires coin. He stood. I'll be back tomorrow with proper lumber. Needs oak or cedar, something that'll hold against the freeze and thaw. He left before she could protest further. True to his word, Thane returned the next morning with fresh-cut cedar planks. He worked through the day, tearing out the old, failing structure and building a new one with joints that fit tight and boards that sat level. Clara watched him from the window. He worked with an economy of motion that was mesmerizing. No wasted effort, just steady, expert progress. Around midday, Clara made a decision. She prepared 2 plates of beans and cornbread. Simple fare, but hot and filling. Thane, she called, opening the door. It's noon. You should eat. He hesitated, calculating whether accepting food would violate the unspoken terms of their arrangement. Finally, he nodded and climbed the half-finished ramp, testing each board. They ate in silence at first. Thane's table manners were decent. He was simply a man more comfortable, with open sky than enclosed walls. Finally, Clara spoke. You're not much for conversation. Never saw the need for it, mostly. Most people can't stand silence. Most people are afraid of their own thoughts. He looked up then, his dark eyes meeting hers directly. You strike me as someone who ain't afraid of much. Clara felt something shift in her chest, not quite warmth, but recognition. The understanding that this man saw her as more than a broken woman in a chair. I'm afraid of plenty, she admitted. Just don't see the point in advertising it. Fair enough. After the meal, he returned to work. An hour later, she heard a crash outside. Thane had accidentally knocked a volume of poetry off the porch railing. He climbed the new solid ramp and brought the book to her, brushing snow from its cover with gentle, large hands. Their fingers brushed briefly. His hands were rough, calloused, but his touch with the fragile book had been respectful. By sunset, the ramp was finished. Clara wheeled onto it. The boards felt solid, level, and true. Relief flooded through her. "This is fine work," she said. "Better than fine, thank you." "It'll hold," Thane said, gathering his tools. "Should last you years." He paused with his hand on the wagon rail. "I'll be back through in 3 weeks. Need anything from town?" Clara hesitated. Pride battled practicality. "Thread, black and brown, and needles, if they're not too dear." "Consider it done." He drove off. Clara sat on her new ramp, watching until his wagon disappeared. The cabin felt warmer somehow, though the fire hadn't changed. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel quite so heavy. Cinematic interlude. A series of quick scenes showing the changing season and their deepening relationship. Thane working on her wobbly chair, reinforcing the porch. Clara cooking and talking about her books. Thane sharing stories of the high peaks, his voice a low rumble. We see the slow, deliberate building of trust. Does partnership require equal footing or just equal commitment? Part 3. The partnership. Spring came, and Thane McRae became a regular presence, arriving every 2 to 3 weeks with supplies he claimed to be caching, but never retrieved. He fixed her chair, reinforced her porch, and even replaced the leather hinges on her door. His repairs were done without discussion. Broken things simply offended his sense of order. Their visits lengthened. They ate together more often, the conversation flowing more freely. Thane spoke of the mountains, the cold rivers, the thick pines. Clara talked less about the life she lost and more about the books she read, the ideas they sparked. She learned he'd been married once. His wife and daughter died in childbirth years ago. He'd gone into the mountains afterward, finding more sense in animal tracks than human company. Easier to be alone than to remember what not being alone felt like, he said. "I understand that," Clara replied quietly. In early April, Thane brought something new, a leather satchel stuffed with tanned hide, tools, and sinew thread. "Brought you something," he said, setting it on her table. "Figured if you're handy with needle and cloth, you might take to leather work." He taught her the basics, how to cut clean lines, punch holes, and stamp patterns. The leather was resistant, requiring strength and precision. When a piece came together, the satisfaction ran deeper than any dress she'd sewn. "You got an eye for it," Thane said, examining a small pouch she'd completed. "Clean work." "I've had practice with precision," Clara replied. Thane sold the finished pieces in town, insisting the money was hers. "I'm just the middleman. You did the work." The money wasn't much, but it was payment for skill and labor, not pity. It was hers. The unspoken tension between them grew. The way Thane's hand would linger when passing a tool. The way Clara caught herself watching him work, appreciating the solid competence of his movements. In late October, Thane arrived to find Clara struggling with her wheelchair. The frame had cracked badly. She'd been trying to bind it with rope. "That ain't gonna hold," he said, kneeling to examine the damage. "Needs proper repair." He looked up at her, his expression serious. "You're the stubbornest woman I've met, and I mean that as a compliment. But this chair failing could hurt you badly. Let me fix it proper." Clara conceded. He carried her carefully to the bed, then took the chair outside. Hours later, he returned, wheeling the chair before him. The frame was reinforced with new wood and iron, the wheels oiled, the seat recovered with fresh leather, her leather. "Good as new," he said. "This is fine work, better than fine, thank you." "You had the talent already," he said, gesturing to her work table. "I just showed you where to point it." They stood in the small cabin. Thane cleared his throat. "I want you to know what I've been doing coming here, helping with things. It ain't pity, it ain't duty. I come here because I want to, because you make this world feel less empty." Clara's breath caught. "You do the same for me," she said softly. Thane turned, his weathered face serious in the twilight. "I ain't a man who says pretty things or makes grand gestures, but I'm steady. What I give true." Part 4. The Reckoning and the Vow. A fortnight later, Thane arrived with a large canvas-wrapped bundle. Raw hides, brass fittings, and dyes for the leatherwork. An investment in her future. "Teach me something new today," Clara said, looking up at him. "Something challenging. Holster work requires precision cutting and wet molding. Difficult, but you're ready for it." They worked until afternoon, his large hands guiding hers, his warmth close beside her. When the holster was set aside to dry, Thane stepped back. Clara watched this solid presence that had become central to her life and felt some last, desperate defense crumble. "Henry," she said, using his first name with a soft intimacy. He turned, and she held out her arms in a gesture of gratitude and invitation. "Come here, please." Thane crossed the small space and knelt. She wrapped her arms around him, intending a simple embrace. But the moment his arms tightened around her, careful and strong, something shifted into inevitability. Clara pulled back just enough to see his face. His expression was raw with uncertainty and want. She kissed him. It was months of loneliness and longing compressed into contact. He responded with a hunger that matched hers, lifting her from the wheelchair with easy strength and carrying her to the bed. She felt desire flood through her, potent and overwhelming. When they were bare to each other, Thane paused, his gaze moving over her body with reverence. "You're beautiful," he said roughly. "Every inch of you." His hands and mouth moved over her, and when he touched her fully, she gasped at the intensity. Thane positioned himself above her. "Careful," she said, her voice breathless. "I can only take 3 inches because of my legs." It was a lie, or perhaps a fearful truth about her changed body and vulnerability. Thane froze, searching her eyes. 3 inches? "Yes, the angle. It's different when my legs can't move the way they should." "All right," he said seriously. 3 inches. I'll be careful." He entered her slowly, moving with deliberate care, never pushing deeper than she could take. But what he gave her was enough, more than enough. His rhythm was steady, his restraint palpable, and Rose felt pleasure crash through her, clutching him as her body shook. Afterward, they lay tangled. "You all right?" he asked. "I'm better than all right, Henry." He pulled her close. "I should tell you, I ain't planning on this being a one-time thing." "Good," she replied. "Because I'm not either?" He struggled for words. "I'm a mountain man, but what I have is yours, if you'll take it." "I want to call it a future," Clara said softly. "And yes, I'll take it. I'll take you." The smile that broke across Thane's face was boyish and bright. News of their courtship spread quickly. On the Saturday before their planned wedding, Victor Penhall rode out, dismounting with stiff precision. "Rose," he said, his gaze shifting curtly to Thane, who stood beside the half-built chicken coop. "I heard disturbing rumors in town. I felt it my duty to ride out and discuss the matter." Clara felt white-hot anger. "Your duty? You forfeited any duty to me the day you walked out of my sick room." Victor's jaw tightened. "I'm thinking of your reputation. You're being taken advantage of. A woman in your condition, vulnerable, isolated. To treat me with respect, to fix my ramp and teach me a trade, to see me as something other than a burden, that's not what I meant." Clara wheeled herself closer. "You saw a broken woman who'd ruined your prospects. Thane sees a partner. Don't you dare question his intentions when yours were selfish from the start." Thane set down his hammer and walked to stand beside her chair. "Penhall," he said quietly, "Rose made her position clear. She's going to be my wife. That makes her happiness and her choices my concern. Time for you to leave." Victor flushed, looking between them. "The town won't accept this. People remember what Rose was." "What I am," Clara corrected coldly, "is a woman who survived what would have broken weaker people. I built a life when everyone expected me to give up. The town can accept it or not. I don't require their permission." Victor mounted his horse, delivering one final venomous shot. "When this ends badly, don't expect sympathy." "Wouldn't dream of it," Clara called after him. Thane knelt beside her chair, covering her hands with his. "Are you sure about this? About me? The town's going to make it difficult. I survived a broken spine, a Colorado winter alone. Do you really think I'm afraid of some gossip?" He grinned. "No, ma'am, I don't reckon you are." Part 5. The Unfolding Years. The wedding took place in the cabin. Thane had built Clara a custom wheelchair, sturdy oak, perfect balance. the seat padded with her own leather. They loved each other with the knowledge that this was just the beginning. 3 years after their wedding, their business was thriving. They'd hired 2 apprentices, and their cabin had expanded into a proper workshop. Then came the surprise. Clara was pregnant. Doc Thorne confirmed it, his face a mix of shock and respect. "This pregnancy carries risks, Mrs. McRae, but women have surprised me before, and you've got a talent for proving people wrong." Thane was terrified. "I can't lose you," he'd said one night, his voice raw. "Not when I finally found you." "You won't," Clara had replied with more confidence than she felt. "I survived a broken spine, a Wyoming winter, and 3 years of your terrible jokes. I can survive this." Their daughter, Ilara, arrived on a cold February morning. 2 years later, their son Thorne arrived with less drama. 3 more years brought Maisie, who came out screaming her displeasure at the world and hadn't stopped having opinions since. Clara's body, which everyone had assumed couldn't bear children, had proven remarkably capable. By the time Clara turned 60, their leather goods business was known throughout the territory. They'd opened a shop in Silver Creek, and orders came from across Colorado and into Wyoming. Clara McRae celebrated her 60th birthday surrounded by family. Thane, now 65, his beard fully gray, stood at her side, his hand resting on her shoulder, that casual touch they had perfected over nearly 30 years. She sat in her latest custom chair. Her children were grown, Ilara managing the shop, Thorne handling inventory, and Maisie making everyone laugh with stories about her latest adventures, guiding hunting parties through the San Juan Range. "What are you thinking about?" Thane asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Everything, nothing. How strange life is." She reached for his hand. "Remember when you first showed up with that firewood? I remember you telling me you didn't need help. I was wrong. I needed a partner. There's a difference. You ever regret it? Marrying a woman who couldn't dance at her own wedding?" Thane turned to her, his weathered face serious. "Clara McRae, I've never regretted a single moment with you, not one. You gave me a reason to come down from the mountains and stay. You gave me family, purpose, partnership. You gave me everything that matters. I love you. Love you too. Even when you cheat at cards," he teased, squeezing her hand. As full dark settled, Thane wheeled her inside, the rhythm of his movement the most natural thing in the world. "Tell me about the mountains," Clara said, as she had 1,000 times before. And Thane, as he always did, painted pictures with his words. When he finished, Clara said what she always said. "Take me there next summer." And Thane replied what he always replied. "Every summer until we're too old to breathe." They settled into bed, his arms solid around her. Clara understood that love wasn't about what you could or couldn't do. It was about who stood beside you, who knelt beside your chair and said, "We'll figure it out together."